Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Danlicker. I'm Vice President of the League of Women Voters, Carrollton, Carroll County. Our president, on behalf of our president, Martha Ann Saunders, and members, we welcome you to our forum, our candidate forum for House District 69. Dr. Bruce Lyon is our moderator tonight, and I'll turn it over to Bruce now.
Hey, thank you, Jennifer. I want to, first of all, welcome and thank our candidates for attending tonight. We have two candidates for District 69, Randy Nix and Herbert Giles. And I also want to welcome our viewing audience, who I understand are connecting with us live via Facebook, and later we'll be able to see a recording on YouTube. Some additional introductions. My wife, Kathy, who as always is serving as my co-moderator this evening. She'll be helping me keep track of questions and the order of answers, and generally trying to keep me on the straight and narrow. Martha Ann Saunders is here also. She is the league president, but she also tonight is serving in the capacity of candidate forum chairperson. Our timekeeper is Walter Danlicker, and our technical coordinator is the long-suffering Gila Gonzalez. She's our techie for tonight. We rely very, very heavily upon her. Just by way of reminder about the ground rules for this evening, our candidates have been given these earlier, but they will have 2 minutes for their opening statements. They'll have 2 minutes for their responses to the questions, and then 2 minutes for their closing statements. The questions have been compiled by the league. Unfortunately, we will not be able to accept questions from the audience for this forum. We regret that. We're usually able to do that. Of course, we were always able to do that when we can meet in person, and we look forward to being able to once again very soon in an in-person format. So if all of our participants will mute themselves when they are not speaking, we can eliminate background noise, and we'll begin with opening statements in alphabetical order, which means that Herbert Giles will give us the first opening statement. So Herbert.
I am unmuted myself. My name is Herbert Giles. I am indeed a candidate running for the 69th House District seat held by Randy Nix. I've been voting in Carroll County good part of my adult life, and unfortunately I always see Randy running by himself, and so he doesn't have any competition. So I decided that maybe I should stick my neck out and risk embarrassment for all of my shortcomings, and see if I could give Mr. Nix a run for his money, so that he can not feel so guilty every time he wins if he doesn't have any competition. I've been a politician since I was in, I think it was 7th grade. I decided to run for vice president or president of student council in the 7th grade, and I was running against the most popular person in the school. And of course, I was surprised that I even got 1 vote, but he was a friend of mine. We sat in the same Sunday school class together. His father, I think, taught it, and so I learned a good lesson not to run against the most popular guy in school. And so it's taken me this long to get back up the courage to run against a popular candidate that Mr. Nix is, and I hope I can give him a run for his money this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Randy, we'll move to you now.
Yes, thank you very much. And I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on the candidate forum. I am Randy Nix. I'm the Republican incumbent, as Mr. Giles has already told you. I've been honored to serve District 69 in the Georgia House since 2007. District 69 has some great local leadership. It has a diverse economy. We've got great agriculture and timber resources, especially in the northern part of the district. We've got advanced manufacturing at Kia in the south and Southwire in the north. We've got great tourism assets with the Chattahoochee River and West Point Lake in the district. We've got outstanding educational institutions. We've got the University of West Georgia, we've got West Georgia Technical College, and we've got LaGrange College. I have been able to develop a great rapport with our local leaders. I've been able to connect them with the state resources to help make West Georgia a great place to live and to work and to raise a family. And I will certainly be greatly honored if you will allow me to continue to serve as your representative.
All right, thank you both for those statements. And now we'll just move directly into the questions, and we will begin first with Randy with this question. We will rotate the order of responses so that no candidate is answering first every time. Randy, you will get the first one here, which is on the subject of broadband access. And the question is as follows. Broadband access is a major concern in rural Georgia, particularly as schools, colleges, and universities and businesses move online in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Cable companies are pressing the legislature to reduce the cost of attaching their equipment to electric membership corporation power poles. How can the problem of internet access in rural areas be resolved?
That's a very good question, and that's something that we've been dealing with, and it is a very important topic at the legislature. We passed some legislation this past session that would allow the EMCs greater opportunity to help provide that. We had some difficulty getting some resolution over what they would charge for the cable companies to attach their wires to their poles. But we've made a lot of progress. We're not there yet. We passed legislation that allowed the EMCs to be able to request money from the federal government. We had to pass legislation for that. And I believe that Carroll EMC is actually part of a pilot program to help do that. It's something that I've worked on. I've had many calls about it, but it's something that is a very, very high priority. It is for me. It is for the leadership in the House. And we will continue to work on it. And there are a lot of innovative ways to go about it. I'm a member of the Rural Caucus, and the Rural Caucus, just about every week we would have a meeting and have somebody else talking about different ways to get that, what they call the last mile, to connect up that final customer. But I assure you it is a very important topic and something that's being worked on, and something that I believe, even if it's going to take a little time, over the next couple of years, we'll get there. And we're finding out, especially during the pandemic, just how important it is for everybody.
All right. And Herbert, we'll move to you now for your response to that question.
Well, I thought Randy did a pretty good answer. It is a very important thing to get connected to the internet. I mean, virtually everything we do or think about right now, I mean, maybe we're too connected. And it's not just broadband that we need. We need Verizon or whatever cable companies to get their wireless connections going. I get cable here in my house, and it's a good thing. Otherwise, I'd probably have to go somewhere else to do this interview. I'm glad that the caucus or Randy is working on this problem, because it is very important, and we do need to get those last roads, as he said, done. And whether it's his leadership or my leadership from this county, it's up to the voters. I think that both of us kind of see that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, and so I don't have any anything further to add.
Okay. All right. Thank you both. This next question will go first to Herbert, and it's an issue of considerable interest here locally on the subject of the storage of coal ash. Here's the question. What standards should be enacted to address the storage of coal ash? Do you believe that lined landfills are sufficient and should be required? And what other precautions should be taken to protect our environment from this toxic hazard? So Herbert, if you be the first to take a crack at this one, please.
Well, I got the hard question, I think. Pollution is a very serious thing. I live here in Carrollton where we have Southwire, and we used to have what was called a copper refinery where we had acid pits made out of lead, and they dumped the acid in there and then the copper, and pretty soon we had a leakage of lead, and I think my father even had a problem with that when he was alive. But we have to think about our future generations. Southwire did the right thing and they just got rid of the plant, although I would have liked to have seen a different solution. But sometimes you have to get rid of the problem. And I'm not sure that that would be what we need to do with the ash, just take it out of the county, take it out of the state. But one thing, we need to study the problem. And if we've already studied it, then we need to do what we need to do to get rid of the problem.
Okay. And Randy, we'll move to you now.
Yes. Coal ash is a big problem. There's been a lot of research on it. Georgia Power has done a lot of research. I think that the lined landfills are a big part of the solution. When they do that, they do a step down process where they're slowly taking the water out. They're able to actually reuse some of the coal ash, some of it, the products there can be recycled. But I think we're at the point now where the science is there to show that if it's done appropriately, that it can be contained. The big thing is we've got to make sure where we're putting it. We need, even if it's lined, we need to stay as far away from the bodies of water as we can stay in case there is leakage. But at this point in time, from what I understand, the way they're doing it, the lined landfills are sufficient to contain that. The technology continues to improve, and there may be some better ways in the future, but right now I think that is the best way to do it.
All right, thank you. And Randy, we'll give you this question first next, and it's on the subject of healthcare in Georgia. What steps should Georgia take to ensure adequate health care for all? Should Medicaid be expanded? And what about citizens living in rural areas where hospitals are in trouble?
Of course, healthcare is on everybody's mind. I do not believe that expanding Medicaid is the way to do it. I'm not sure that government does that as well as other areas. And one of the reasons for that, you'll find out that many doctors do not take new Medicaid patients. So if we suddenly expanded, everybody might have a card, but they may not have anywhere to go. I think we're better off to work on private market solutions where we can empower individuals to be able to go and get their own insurance through a different source. As far as the local hospitals, the smaller hospitals, I have worked hard on trying to protect the smaller hospitals. The opportunity right now, it's very difficult, but if we will work to make sure that we support them, they are the lifeline for people in rural Georgia, and we just can't afford to let those close. But I think that the best thing we can do, the state of Georgia has applied for some waivers from the Affordable Care Act, and these waivers would allow a greater access to the private market for individuals. We already take care of the very old and the very young. So it's that group in the middle that we're working on. And I think that the opportunities there through those waivers will greatly improve their opportunity to be able to get insurance and to be able to get to health care. But the big problem, as you said, is access. And we've got to continue to work, especially in the rural areas, to make sure that our resources are there, whether it be the hospitals, whether it be the doctors. We've got to incentivize them to be in those rural areas, and we're working on that.
Okay, thank you. And Herbert, your turn.
Our nation is not even in the top 10 as far as healthcare goes. It's like number 15. And Georgia ranks number 39th. And this is pretty much unacceptable. I think that we can do better. Expanding Medicaid is the very least we should do immediately. You said in your question that you want to get health care for all people, and that's what I want to do. I don't think that that's what the other side has in mind, or at least they haven't given us any indication of that. Healthcare, especially now, we're seeing that everybody could, well, not everybody, but a big percentage of people could all of a sudden have COVID-19 as their pre-existing condition and be denied healthcare. I think that we need to get rid of pre-existing conditions. We need to establish healthcare for all and do it in a way that is something like Social Security. I mean, I was talking with someone today. It's like we're in a battlefield, and if your buddy gets sidelined or shot, you're not going to leave him on the battlefield to die. You're going to do your best to get him and take him back to where he can get the care that he needs. This is one of the, I think, the strongest differences I feel from my colleague Randy is the seriousness of healthcare. And Georgia being 39th means that the Republican Party is not doing their job.
Okay, we'll have to stop at that point since our time is up for that question. And Herbert, we want you please to answer this next one first on the subject of Georgia's citizens arrest law. Changes to the Georgia citizens arrest law failed to pass this year. What are your thoughts about this legislation?
I'm not really sure what this law entails. I have to apologize for that. Can you give me a hint?
Well, under our protocols, I'm not
Okay.
allowed to expand on the question, but
Well, let me speak to something in the same vein. Crime and punishment, or crime and, I mean, here again, Georgia ranks like number 27th around in the nation, which is pretty much what we would call average if you're talking about 50 states. And we've got problems with we've got problems. I've got problems coming up with something to say. I didn't understand the question, but one thing, okay, let's say that the United States, we incarcerate more people than, Russia, China. I mean, we've got a problem with incarceration. We need to learn to do something else besides incarcerate every time we arrest somebody. Violent crime, okay, but if a person can be rehabilitated, he doesn't need to be locked up in jail, then I say there can be all kinds of programs that can be done to avert incarceration.
Okay.
Well, I'm about out of time, so I'll leave it
All
at
right.
that.
Okay, thank you. And Randy, what are your thoughts about this law?
The citizens arrest law, I think we need to take a look at. There are times when it may be appropriate if a merchant is trying to detain someone who's maybe shoplifting or something until the authorities can get there. There may be times when that is somewhat appropriate. I think this came into question with the Ahmaud Arbery situation down in South Georgia. The individuals who caused his death claimed that they were making a citizen's arrest. I don't think that was an appropriate defense for them. This needs to be looked at. I don't know what the solution is. I've talked to several people about it, talked to some attorneys about it, and they seem to think that if we can come up with something that would allow merchants to somehow try to detain people who may be in their business who have shoplifted or something, that would be appropriate. But to go out and hunt somebody down and say you're making a citizen's arrest is just not appropriate.
Okay. The next question has to do with racial disparities in our criminal justice systems. Question reads as follows. National studies show that Black Americans are more likely than white Americans to be stopped, arrested, and killed by police. What do you think Georgia should do to address racial disparities in our criminal justice system? And Randy, you be the first responder for this one, please.
Yes. You know, I was raised during the civil rights era, during the 60s and 70s. And I'd have to say that we have come a long way since that time. But the obvious thing now, in light of what's happened over the last few months, is we still have a lot of problems that we have not addressed in terms of racial equality, especially in the justice system. I think that we're at a point in time right now where we've got that inflection point that we can go back and revisit that and maybe get to where we need to be. A point in case, we passed the hate crimes law in Georgia this year. I don't think that would have passed had it not been for the obvious situations that we were seeing with the George Floyd incident, with Ahmaud Arbery, and some of the others that occurred. So I think that we're at that point in time, if we can get people of goodwill to sit down at the table, to put it out there, what they're looking for when somebody says we want social justice, exactly what does that mean? I'm not exactly sure I can define it, but if we can get both sides of the table with decision makers, leaders of both sides to sit down and discuss that, I think we're at that point now where the public is aware of what's going on. We've seen it all too vividly, and I think we can make some changes. But I think the police departments would welcome some more training. There are a lot of things that could go into that, but I think we're at that point now where we can make some changes.
All right. And Herbert, your response, please.
Yeah, I too think that we need to give the police some more training. And in addition, perhaps add people who are already trained in psychology or something and have them working with the police to make assessments. You don't want to have somebody going into a situation who's clearly an abnormal psychological situation, and then have them being shot at by an untrained police officer who doesn't recognize symptoms. Thank you. And the whole, I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, when I graduated college, I had a degree in psychology, and I couldn't get a job. And after a few interviews, I kind of gave up. But it would have been nice had there been more positions so that I could have, done something that I was supposedly trained in. But so I think that Randy is right. We need more training for the police, a lot more. I mean, I don't know what it is. They have 6 weeks of training, 6 months, I'm not sure, but that's hardly enough time to do anything. I mean, and also there is a problem with our culture, and we haven't gotten over it yet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Herbert, we'll ask you to be the first responder to this next one, and it is on the subject of climate change. Do you believe that climate change is real and that human behavior contributes to global warming? What policies should the state enact to address climate change?
I've lived here in Georgia for, as an adult, most of my life. And if you don't know that climate change is real by now, I don't think you've been, well, you aren't as old as I am. The science is there. They're screaming at us to do something. They've been screaming several years, and now it's almost too late, and our children are going to suffer as a consequence. But we can still do something, and perhaps if we do something now, then when they're at the age where they have to take care of the problem, maybe they'll be in a little better shape. Climate change is real, and it's man-made, and we're running out of fossil fuels to begin with, so we're still going to have to figure out what to do when that happens. But if we keep burning them, we're just burning our lives away, essentially. This is a very serious problem, and one that we need to take seriously. And we can create jobs, and thank you, and figure out what we need to do if we just accept the problem as real. Thank you.
Okay. And Randy?
It's obvious that the climate has changed. Is it cyclical? Is it man-made? Is it going to change? I'm old enough to remember back the front page of, I think it was Life magazine back in the 70s, where the headline was, we're fixing to have another ice age. So I believe that the climate is changing. I'm not exactly sure what's causing it. I'm concerned that it's become so highly politicized that rather than really look at the facts, we take sides politically on it, and that's unfortunate. However, I do think that we're making some strides in the state to address the things that we can. I know I passed some local legislation this last session for Troup County to allow the Walmart facilities there to put solar panels on to generate a lot of their own power. It actually took local legislation so that they could do that to get around the local utility. But I think anything that we can do in terms of conservation, in terms of trying to use green energy, I think that's good. I'm not 100% sure that we need to turn this over to the government to charge us a lot of money to do something, but as technology is advancing, we're beginning to be able to do things now that make economic sense, like using more solar energy, like using more wind power. So whether or not it's real, I think we need to be taking all of the steps that we can. And I think that the state of Georgia has approved a lot of those and will continue to approve those in terms of being able to use your own solar power and those type things.
Okay. The next question has to do with one of the constitutional amendments on the ballot this year, the one that deals with sovereign immunity. Question is, a constitutional amendment proposes that the legal doctrine of sovereign immunity be waived to permit citizens to sue state and local governments. What is your position on this amendment? And Randy, we would hear from you first, please.
Yes. Of course, I was there for the debate on this. I had some doubts about it early on, but I do support that amendment now. What the amendment does, it allows a citizen to be able to sue a governmental entity that has violated the Constitution. It will not allow individuals to go and sue other individuals. You can't sue for damages, but you can sue for your rights. This goes back, I think, to Old English law where you couldn't sue the king or whatever, but this will give a redress for a citizen. And one of the examples was given, if you live in a place and let's say you put a sign on your lawn that has some message on it and the government doesn't like it and they said that you can't have it there. You would be able to, if you feel like they have infringed on your constitutional rights, you would be able to sue the government to get your rights back to express yourself as you wished. So I do support it.
Okay. And Herbert?
Well, I was not there for the debate, so I'm not privy to all the, I always think it's a good sign when you can sue the government or anybody else, but I'm really not cognizant of all the debate around this question, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And we'll give you, Herbert, first crack at this next one, which has to do with the state budget for fiscal 2021, which included about $2.2 billion in cuts to public education, higher education, behavioral and developmental disabilities, public health, and human services. Among these cuts, what should be the General Assembly's priorities for restoration of funds?
I think I've made myself clear that I don't approve of all the cuts in education simply because we're already way behind in education. I'm not sure that throwing money at a problem fixes it, but at least we're doing something. And so I'm kind of questioning why they're making all these cuts, especially when we're so far behind in that. I mean, I can understand if it was to balance a budget or something of that nature, but there might be other cuts that can be made and not so much in education. Also, I think you mentioned disabilities and things like that, and so I'm against. I mean, people that are disabled need to get around. They don't need obstacles any more than they have. I mean, I can remember years ago when we first passed legislation to get something like that done, and I don't think we need to turn back now. Uh, so education and all those things that you mentioned are very important, and not sure where we can cut other, uh, but I'm sure that we need to do something other than $1 billion cut from education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Randy, your thoughts?
Yes, I think to address that, you kind of have to look at the entire budget. If you look at the issues that you mentioned there, specifically the K-12 education, public health, if you add all that up, that's probably close to 70% of the budget. So if you've got to make cuts of that magnitude, you're going to have to cut those programs, because the 2.2 billion would wipe out most of the agencies of the state if that was the only place you cut. If you did not cut education, or you did not cut health services. But I think if you look at the budget, you see where our priorities are. Education alone is approaching 50% of our budget. So we're saying that that is a high priority. And I will assure you that when we started looking at cuts, that was the last thing that we wanted to cut. Also, when you look at healthcare, that's roughly 25%, 23, 25% of the budget there. We tried not to cut that. With that said, in the House, and I serve on the Appropriations Committee for Education in the House, we were able to take that budget and we put some of those funds back in there for some of those critical areas, for school nurses and some of those people that had been cut pretty severely. So the priority is for education and for those disabilities and those things that you're talking about. And while they were the last thing we wanted to cut, I think you'll see as the funds begin to come back, that'll be the first place that we'll begin to put them back. Before the pandemic, we had fully funded education, the QBE formula, for the second year in a row. I think that's very, very important, and I hope that we can get back to that. But if you're going to cut that much out of the budget, you've got to go to those big items, and unfortunately, those are the big items.
Okay. Randy, the state employees and teachers are concerned about their retirement funds. What should the General Assembly do to assure them that their pensions are sufficiently funded? Well,
the pensions are funded. Of course, the retirees, the employees funded some. The state puts in a significant amount of money. Back several years ago, over a 2-year period, we put in almost $1 billion kind of to prop those up. So I would tell them that the state is going to honor its commitments. I think that the retirement plans are critical. I know the teachers' retirement, that's a big part of their program, a big part of their recruitment process. So we need to keep those sound. However, I think that going forward, we're going to have to look at some other ways to provide retirement. And the reason I say that, if you look at the states, Georgia right now has a AAA bond rating. We've been very, very strong in our finances. But if you look at the states that are having major financial difficulties, I think you'll find that one of the common denominators is their retirement plans and having to keep those funded. So I would tell the retirees that I think there is virtually no chance at all you would see any reduction in what you have. However, I think going forward for new employees, we need to begin having a discussion about other ways to provide retirement. And if you look around, there are very few businesses that have the defined benefit plans such as the state has now. And the reason they don't have them is because they are so very expensive. So if you're a retiree now, or you're in the system with that guaranteed retirement, I feel certain that you're going to get that. But going forward, we need to begin to look and have some discussions about other ways to provide that retirement.
Okay. And Herbert?
Yeah, I think it's very important for retirees to have something they can depend on. And that's the most important thing that I can say about that. You don't want some high risk or even low risk situation. You don't want to risk your retirement. You want it to be stable. And I think that whatever we do, we need to make sure that is a stable thing. I mean, because when you retire, that's exactly what you're doing. You don't have any other means of livelihood unless you've done a lot of saving in your lifetime. And for me, that hasn't been something I can talk about. So if I had retirement, I would like for it to be stable and not going away. Thank you.
Okay. Herbert, what is your position on the issue of tax dollars and tax credits for charter schools and for private schools?
Well, I'm not sure that I am in favor of either one. I mean, of course, private schools are private schools and they can do what they want. And charter schools are some kind of hybrid. Well, I mean, we all pay taxes, and so I don't see my taxes going into some kind of private school when I want to support public schools and have the best public schools that we can have. So as far as somebody wanting to opt out and have their taxes go somewhere, I just don't understand it. I support public schools and I want to see public schools thrive. And I know my sister might argue with me when she brought her kids up, homeschooled them. But I mean, she was in a situation that she could do that, and but she had to pay for it, and I don't think I should have had to pay for her kids unless they're going to public schools. Thank you.
Okay, and Randy?
Yes, I've been a big supporter of the charter schools, and charter schools are public schools. They provide some other opportunities. I know Carroll County has two college and career academies that are charter schools, and they provide some really great opportunities there for our students. I think the problem we've got is we've gotten to somewhat of a one size fits all, and that doesn't necessarily work. While they are tax dollars, the individuals are paying taxes, and sometimes I think they need some flexibility, especially with special needs children. We've got special needs vouchers that fit that need. I think we've seen over these last few months where there were situations where people wanted their children to be back in school face to face, and the schools were not open. They had to come up with creative ways to do that. And personally, I wish there were a way that they could have their tax dollars somehow follow that, because the parent should be able to make some of those decisions. So I want to fully fund our school system, but I think we need to be open to the idea that there's not just a one size fits all, and there should be opportunities for each child to meet their individual need, and that may not be able to be met just directly at a public school.
Okay. Randy, here is another education related question. Among the 2021 priorities for the Georgia Association of Educators is opposition to any legislation that would allow school personnel other than trained resource officers to be armed. Do you favor or oppose the arming of other personnel?
I don't have a problem with it as long as it's authorized locally, and as long as no one is forced to do it. The old scenario of where you're going to force your English teacher to carry a gun. That's not what was ever proposed. Personally, I think if a local board of education feels like that is a policy they want, they're willing to go on record to vote to support it. If they're willing to provide the training for the individual, and I think it needs to be coordinated with local law enforcement if they decide to do that. I was at a meeting back, I guess, a couple of years ago after one of the major shootings at a school, where we had the superintendents there, we had law enforcement there, we had the DOE people there. And it really broke down to what the local people wanted to do. There were some superintendents and some systems said, absolutely not, we don't want to do it. But there were some of them that said, we feel quite comfortable with it. So I think it should be a local decision, but no one should be forced to do it. It should be people who volunteer, people who are willing to be trained, and that people that can follow the protocol that's necessary to be able to react if a situation comes up where they would need to use that weapon.
And Herbert?
I kind of agree with Randy there. Maybe it's a local problem. I mean, certainly if you're in Kennesaw, maybe you should be carrying a gun. But generally speaking, I think teachers should be teaching and students should be learning. And there's an enforcement officer there. He should be enforcing. I think it's safe to say that we can always add security, but we don't need to add guns to the problem, especially people that aren't there to use a gun. And certainly if a teacher wants to go through training to learn how to use a gun, I don't object to that. But I think that when you're learning how to use a gun, you should know how to take it away from someone. And using a gun is not, and especially it's going to be the first time they've probably ever used one. So definitely don't think a teacher needs to be holding a gun. Thanks.
Okay, and now this next one will be our last question before we move to your closing statements. And Herbert, will ask you to respond to this one first. Georgia prisons have been criticized for overcrowding and for poor medical care of inmates, including protection from the coronavirus. What improvements do you advocate for Georgia correctional facilities?
Well, certainly prisons have been a problem going back decades because we don't always incarcerate people to help them get better. We do it more as a punishment. And as riots in Attica that happened several years ago show us that, there's a limit to how much you can do to a prisoner before he bites back. We need to give them medical care. We need to empty out our prisons, as I said earlier, to only the violent criminals, and to get people in other programs and get them educated and get them out of the rut that they must have found themselves in to commit the crime in the first place. I hope I don't sound too idealistic, but we are one of the most incarcerating countries in the world. And if other countries can get away with not incarcerating so many people, then my question to you is how are they doing it, and and the crime is not, I mean, crime in America is outrageous, and so we need to find another solution other than locking them up. Thanks.
Okay. And Randy.
Yes, the prison system is a difficult place for something like this because of the close proximity. It's very difficult to do. My position is this: because they're in jail does not mean they've given up their constitutional rights, or they have constitutional rights to health care to be able to be protected. And since they are essentially in the care of the government is obligated to do that. I don't think we're doing as good a job as we should. I know that's already been brought up in a number of areas, and it's being looked at very closely. This is one area I would agree with Herbert on, though, that if we can figure out how to keep those people out of there in the first place, it's very helpful. And over the last few years, especially under Governor Deal, we've passed some criminal justice reform that has begun to reduce our prison population. And I think we need to continue to work on that. But as far as COVID and the medical care of inmates, I think that they are due that from the state because they are in the custody of the state.
Okay. We all appreciate your answers to these questions. And we're ready now to move to your closing statements. And the first one will be given by Randy.
Yes. And let me thank you again for the forum. I think it was very well done. And Herbert, it's good to meet you, even though we haven't met in person. I appreciate your participation. Georgia's working through some very difficult times right now, but I know that we will come back strong. We've been the #1 state for business for 7 years in a row. The conservative policies that have been put in place over the past decade by Republicans continue to attract business and jobs to Georgia. And our economy is already recovering. I have the experience and the seniority necessary to make sure that District 69 is at the table when the important decisions are being made in Atlanta that will affect the constituents of our district. And I ask for your vote and your support so that I can continue to work for you in Atlanta. And again, thank you for the forum.
And Herbert, we'll ask you for your statement now.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the time you've given me to speak. I know that Randy's proud of the economy that the Republican Party has given to Georgia. And I just say that I want to keep Georgia strong. And I think the most important way we can do that is through our education and through our health care. And if we let that fall to the wayside by taking all the money away from education and by letting our health care then go, then we're not going to have a way to attract new businesses, which is what we need to do if we're going to keep the economy strong. I don't think I have too much of a chance to win this election, but I'm glad that Randy's going to do his job as a senior member if he gets reelected, and all power to him if that's the case. And if I, by some luck of the Irish, get to win, then I would look to Randy for his guidance in making my term as a member of the House just as successful as he's been. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. Thanks to everyone here. And if there's nothing else, then we can consider ourselves adjourned. So thanks again.